What's up, everybody? This video is from ExpectedV. He is 3-tabling some NL25. In the lower left, we open from the small blind with a Queen 6 offsuit. I think that's okay. The guy in the big blind is 18-15. According to the stats here, his fold big blind is 75%, and he's got kind of tight stats overall. So I would, when you raise 3x there against guys like that, it's usually going to show like an immediate profit or an immediate break even, and so it's going to be fine to open there with just about anything. Although I might not do it with something like a 2-6 offsuit, that if you end up showing down, it makes it extremely obvious that you're opening every hand. But with a Queen 6, I think it's fine. On this board, though, against a player like this, his calling range is mostly going to be broadways, pocket pairs, some suited connectors, suited aces, whatever. But his range there, when he's folding that much before the flop, is going to be extremely Broadway heavy. In position, even tight guys, they're not going to fold hands like Jack 10, Queen 10, King King, and there's so many like offsuit Broadway combinations that it just it's a huge portion of his range. So on this flop, I would I would either just give up, or I would plan on betting more than once if I do bet, so that at least if he has a hand like King 10, Queen 10, some like gut shot, a weak pair or whatever, that he'll fold the weaker things on the turn. But if you just bet once, it's probably better just to check fold the flop. And I see that we took a note that he called our flop c-bet with third pair, but it's really like that might mislead you later, because it's a lot different when you're small blind versus big blind and he has position on you. Just everybody in general is going to like the requirements for playing hands and continuing hands, calling flops, things like that. It's going to be way less in that situation than it would be normally, which it really should be. And here in the lower left, we open with an ace-6 suited from the cutoff. That's kind of borderline, but I think it's okay because you have a tighter guy behind you. You have one of the few fishy guys on any of the tables is in the small blind. So I'm definitely opening wider than I would normally, because I'm expecting this Duncan guy that's on a button. He's going to fold a ton of the time, so I'm definitely opening more than I would if I had kind of a fishy guy behind me, especially with a hand that doesn't play great out of position like an ace-6, but that does fine against the blinds. So I think that's okay, because it's not very far under what we would normally open with anyway, which would probably be like an ace-8 or an ace-9. Okay, here on the upper right, this talk house guy, he limps in the small blind, and we have a queen 8 offsuit. In this situation, you should raise there. I would check if I had if I had a 10-4 or something, I would check there. But this guy, he's kind of fishy. I'm not super loose so far. He's only played 12 hands, but he's 29 so far, so he looks like kind of a semi-loose passive fish. And obviously, regulars aren't gonna be 27-9. They're not limping the small blind, but his ranger is going to be pretty weak, and plus you're in position. Your hand has some high card value. That's a very easy raise. It's going to be more profitable to raise there in position than it is to check and free roll. And it's an interesting turn because it's a very bad turn card for us in terms of our situation went downhill a lot. We had top pair before, and we were getting called by a bunch of straight draws, flush draws, worse pairs. The ace brings in one of the bigger draws. It brings in king jack, spade draws that had an ace now have a better pair. So it definitely hurts our equity, and it hurts our ability to, if he has smaller pairs, he might fold them sometimes when we bet. So it hurt us a lot, but at the same time, you're probably still getting called by some worse. You're still getting called by stuff like king 10, jack 10, smaller flush draws, just random terrible calls that you wouldn't expect a guy to make. So. And a lot of the hands that do beat us, it's decently likely that he would have raised before the flop. So I think if you bet here on the turn, the range that he continues with, you're probably about flipping with. So I like the bet there just because, when you are flipping, you usually come out better betting because you'll get bet into less on the river. Which could be a bad thing and sometimes force us to fold the best hand. So you'll get your money in even versus what he puts in on the turn, but you'll win the hand more often on the river. So I like betting there even though it's kind of thin. But it's close. And another bad river card hits a bunch of stuff. And it turns out that he had ace 10, which is a weird play. On a lot of levels. But it just goes to kind of confirm that that he is a loose passive fish, or at least definitely passive for sure. And we take a note that says he's passive when he turned top 2. Which is true, most people would be more aggressive there. But it's also worth noting, or at least mental noting, his pre-flop play was very passive also. His flop play was passive too. He had middle pair, top kicker with a backdoor flush draw, and, kind of a dry board where he could get some value. So, just overall, every street of that hand, flop, pre-flop, turn, river, he's just checky collie the whole way in a situation where, obviously it didn't warrant it. So we'll definitely have to keep that in mind in future hands, is that he's just all around passive. Okay, a couple kind of semi-interesting spots with kings here. One a little more interesting than the other. On the left, you've got a short stack that raises on the button. That's 22-3, 23. His steal is 40% so far. So, you know, he's got pretty reggy stats, just some like reg short stack guy. And the guy behind us is short stack too. So it's at least a consideration of whether you would call, just because, you know, if you did call, if the big blind folds, there's like, you know, 175 in the pot, and, you know, the guy's only going to have 4 or 5 times the pot in his stack. So you could still, I mean, you can get in very easily with kings, or if the other guy plays whatever. Plus the other guy, you know, he's got reggy stats so far too. Maybe he's shoving decently wide there when you call. Who knows? So I think there is some merit to calling there. I think on average you probably just make more raising though. You know, I think that he's still going to probably get it in kind of wide before the flop because of his stack size. He's an aggressive player and he knows you are, and he's on the button, whatever. So I think on average you probably make more raising there, but it's definitely like, it definitely has a lot of ingredients that would at least make you consider calling there. Like in micro stakes games, like slow playing isn't usually that great of an option, but one of the things that can make it more of an option is when the pot is very large relative to stacks, because you don't, you know, the missing an opportunity to get all the money in is no longer a factor. But again, in this situation, I'd probably raise there. Now on the right, you raise from the cutoff. You get 3-bet by a 13-7 guy, but it's only 15 hands. So all we really know about him is that he's probably not a big fish. He's some kind of a regular. And so, you know, he could be 3-betting there pretty wide when you open from the cutoff. So again, you have to consider calling at least, just because, you know, if he has a really wide range there, a lot of times you can just call him in position and let him spew chips into a big hand. Whereas, you know, when you 4-bet, if his range is wide enough and you don't have any history, he might be folding a ton of his 3-betting range. I'd say that without history, though, it's probably better just to 4-bet. I think against the average guy, he's not going to be 3-betting wide enough that I want to call here. Now, if we had more hands and we know that he was like kind of spastic or just 3-bet super wide, then I like calling in position, just because he's going to blow through a lot of chips out of position against a good hand. But in this case, you're probably going to come out better on average, just you know, with this straightforward 4-bet. And overall, these games are pretty terrible, by the way. Like, we've got the one guy, the Talk House guy, with the, you know, he's 3313, and his screen name looks like it was made by a 14-year-old girl or something, with the alternating uppercase letters. So, you know, you've got that guy, but like everybody else is like 19, 16, 22, 20, whatever. Although I realize that for Americans, you know, I'm not sure if this guy's American or not, but for Americans, like, you only have so many options, and a lot of them are either kind of shady or on sites where you're just going to deal with the games that are like super tough for the levels because there aren't a lot of options for regulars. I know I myself, after Black Friday, I played live almost all of this year, so I haven't been playing online a whole lot up until just recently. And I played on Everleaf, which is they don't have nearly as much traffic as this network, and the games are better. But man, the software is terrible, and I don't know. it's pretty ghetto. Hopefully we'll get some kind of regulation in place here in the United States pretty soon, because the options, like if you're watching this and it's something that you haven't looked into a whole lot, like if you're American, I would recommend don't put any amount of money online in poker sites right now that you don't consider expendable. Like if it would really break your spirit if you couldn't get your money out, and then don't bother with it, because it's it's somewhat of a risk at this point. But if you're responsible about it, it's still fine. If you put on an amount of money that isn't going to break you, if something did happen and there was a huge delay in getting it, or even if you couldn't get it at all, if you're responsible about it, you can still, online poker is still a great way to improve your game, and not that you couldn't make money also, but there's definitely some merits to still playing, even though it's kind of a hassle at this point. The main benefit is it's just by far the best way to improve your game. Whoops, I accidentally hit the wrong button there for a second and skipped our video. I think I got it back to about the right place now. On the upper right hand table we have this Ace-7 offsuit, and before I back this up like 5 minutes there, we 3-bet this guy, Duncan 107. He's got a 75% fold to 3-bet so far. He's going to be stealing enough there that he'll probably fold a lot. We have an ace blocker. Now we have a hand that we can't call with anyway, so I like that 3-bet. We don't have a ton of history with him. I mean, he's got like 231 hands, but he's been pretty tight, straightforward. So, as far as we know. So, even though we got 4-bet this time, I think that's a decent 3-bet. Okay, upper right again. We had King 6 offsuit on the button. And according to your folds and big blind stat, Duncan folds 73% of the time. And then you've got a 15-12 guy behind you. You only have 26 hands only so far, but his fold and big blind is 100%. But even with just kind of like a junky offsuit king, like you have these tight guys behind you. That's going to be a profitable open there because you're going to be taking the blinds a pretty high percentage of the time, and it's not as if you're never going to win when you get called. Duncan has a 4.63 bet, so it's not like you're getting blown off your hand a ton there either. So definitely bet there with a very wide range with these two guys behind you. And there was a similar situation on the upper left table a couple minutes ago. It just like I was going to say something about it, and then the lobby popped up on top of it or something. So I didn't exactly see all the stats. But the point is, like when you play on these tables where there's a ton of guys that are just like 19, 16, 20, 17, 18, 15. Always look at that folds to steal, or in this case, you got folds and big blind. That's going to be a pretty similar stat. You're not going to be able to just guess what they do by looking at their VPIP and PFR. So always pay attention because it's going to change drastically what you should open on the button. I mean, you're just if you've got guys that fold behind you a ton, like, you're leaving a lot of money on the table by not opening super wide on the button. Because most of them really don't, even if they know you steal a lot, they just have like ranges that they play out of the blind. And even if they did adjust, it's, you can adjust after they adjust. But for the time being, most of the time when you've got two tight regulars behind you, especially guys that have low 3-bets, you should be opening very, very wide. It looks like here he's looking through that hand to see what was up with Talk House there. And it looks like he called flop and then raised turn with a gut shot and a flush draw. Which is pretty surprising, considering how passive that he played before, when he had that ace-10. Here on the upper right, again, these two guys behind me, Queen 3 suited isn't the greatest hand ever, but that's going to be probably a profitable open against these guys, so I don't like folding there. And like I say, you can always change your mind. If you're opening very wide and you notice that the guys behind you are adjusting to it, but make them do that first, because by default these guys are playing pretty tight there. On the upper right, I kind of don't mind just checking back there with sevens instead of betting, because this guy's range for calling us out of the big blind is going to be pretty Broadway heavy. A lot of guys with these stats aren't even calling the small pairs. Some of them do, some of them don't. But his range is going to be lots of Broadways, suited aces, stuff like that. So he hits a bunch of this board, and some of the hands that we do beat, like small pocket pairs, once we check behind the flop, he might even let us get to showdown with free with those. So on this particular board versus this opponent with kind of his likely range, that's one spot I don't mind checking back, even though a decent amount of time we're going to end up folding the best hand on the turn when he has queen jack, king jack, whatever, just because I'm not expecting this opponent to just check call and then never put in a bet with those hands unimproved anyway. So and not that they don't have decent equity against you anyhow. So I kind of like checking that one back, actually. And here in the upper left, it's kind of a weird spot. This guy's played 6 hands. He's obviously a big fish. He's 83-33 so far. So we could technically 3-bet for value there with our aces, but it makes more sense to just call in position. He's going to make a ton of mistakes post-flop, and we have a kind of hand that doesn't really play that great in 3-bet pots, especially versus weird spazzy guys that we don't know anything about. So I like calling there. And I don't mind betting the turn. That's kind of close, but you always have the best hand, and you can get called by, gut shot kind of stuff with an ace high or whatever. Okay, here in the upper left, with the king jack, we get 3-bet by a guy who's got a 4% 3-bet, and he's looking in his notes. I don't think there's really much you're going to find in there that's going to tell you to call with the king jack. He's just too tight. You've got 350 hands on him, and he's 4.2 3-bet. And he's writing in chat that he's got a 14% squeeze. But here's the thing. You have to think about your sample size. 351 hands is a pretty decent size for 3-bet, so that's going to be a fairly accurate number. Right now it's 5 after that hand, which is pretty conservative for a taggy guy. That's a semi-bluff here and there, or maybe 3-betting once in a while, blind versus blinds with hands that are, like ace-jack kind of stuff, whatever. It's mostly pretty straightforward. And that's going to be a pretty accurate stat over that many hands. Squeeze, on the other hand, how many opportunities do you get to squeeze out of 351 hands? I'm not sure, 20 or something? I don't know to be exactly, but it's not a whole lot. The point is, he would have the opportunity to 3-bet much more often than the opportunity to squeeze. So looking at those stats and the fact that just about everything about him is conservative, and the sample on those numbers is much larger than the squeeze number. I'm going to go by that. And really, most guys that are fairly conservative don't squeeze a bunch anyway. Usually there's two kinds of guys. There's guys that squeeze way too much, and then there's guys that, that are just conservative with it like they are with everything else. There aren't really a ton of in-between guys at these levels anyhow. Okay, and here we run into a similar situation, but this guy, we've got 5,400 hands on him. His squeeze is 8, which is, decently big. But looking at the situation, he knows that we're an aggressive reg, obviously. If we have 5,400 hands on him, he probably has quite a few hundred hands on us. We've got this fishy guy behind us. He's played 8 hands. He's 50-0. So while this guy's range might not be real bluffy, he can definitely be opening kind of wide there with this fish guy behind us and the fact that we're going to fold a lot. Like, there's a lot of hands. Like, even if he has a hand like, an ace-10 or something, like, that's a hand I'd want to 3-bet with there to try and get rid of the regular and play against this, like, loose fishy guy behind us. So even if he doesn't have a ton of bluffs in his range, and he will have maybe some bluffs. He's pretty aggro overall, so he could make some like spastic bad moves, even though he's just going to get called a ton by this cha-ching bling 76 guy. But overall, if you have a hand that plays pretty good in position, and it's probably in decent shape against his range, and you have a fish that's going to come along quite a bit too, which is good in 2 ways. Not only are you going to get money from the fish a decent amount of times when you flop top pair, and he has something worse that he doesn't want to fold, but when he calls, which is going to happen a lot, it's going to force this regular that 3-bet to play straightforwardly after the flop. So a lot of times, like when he raises and you both call, this other reg is usually going to have to check fold when he misses. Not always, it depends on the board and how silly he is. But quite often, your position is going to be a huge advantage on him, and he's going to have to play straightforward. And we do call in, so does cha-ching bling 76. And obviously this is about as bad of a board as we can get. It totally misses us. It hits the fish pretty hard. So even if he does check, we're not going to be bluffing this time, because we wouldn't even bluff heads up against this fishy guy. It just nails his range. And it's worth noting, when this guy bets here, this bet size probably can't really be good with anything. I mean, half pot is fairly standard in 3-bet pots because the pot is kind of bloated and you can get all the money in by the river anyway. But he can't be bluffing here. I mean, he could make a terrible bluff, but it would be really bad. Odds are he's usually just going to have an overpair or some piece of the board, some kind of value or good semi-bluffing hand. There really isn't much point to this bet size because it's not like it's going to induce anything from you. It's not like it's going to look weak to you. It just looks like what it is, which is a value range. So he might as well bet bigger to get more value from both you and the fishy guy, and to protect versus all the different things that could be drawing live against him. And it looks like our guy is explaining in chat why he called the squeeze, and yeah, I think that's fine. I think it's profitable too. And he does get called by the fish. The jack of clubs comes on the turn, and as expected, he doesn't have a value hand. He shoves the turn, and the fish folds. If he had bet larger on the flop, he's probably still getting called by the same hands from the fish. So, yeah, if you're out there Oz dusk, I would just bet more on the flop, bud. Okay, here on the lower left we have ace-4 suited and regular opens from the small blind. That one's kind of close. It's one that came up in another video that I made recently. I like 3-betting here more too, especially against this type of player. It's probably going to be opening fairly wide and folding quite a bit of his hands. guys don't like to call 3-bets out of position too much usually, regular set is. But we have the kind of hand that even though we have decent equity, it has a little bit of playability problems after the flop. It's close. I'm definitely calling there with ace-9 suited, ace-4 suited. I like the raising a little bit more, but I don't hate calling. And we do get called, and we just hit like a monster flop. And I definitely bet here, like, there are some merits to checking in that, when he does have air, obviously, we have the board on lockdown here, so, if he did have some king, queen, king, jack, or whatever, like if I knew he had that hand, I would obviously check, but a decent amount of his calling range here is going to be like ace, queen, ace, jack, ace, 10, 9s, 10s, jacks, and so you're just getting called there a bunch. Plus, you're not going to get raised by, well, for one, you're probably not going to get raised as a bluff too much here unless he has some sort of semi-bluff. Not that it really matters when we have this huge of a hand anyway. But you're usually just getting called by stuff, a lot of stuff that's ahead of you, like ace, jack, and ace, queen. It's not going to raise on the flop, so in position, you're still going to be in command even against those hands that are, technically ahead of you, but with your huge draw and your position, you're still going to do quite well. And he does call, and we turn the nuts. And obviously there isn't much to do other than bet again. And just hope he has more of the ace variety hands as opposed to the middle pair variety hands. Because, blind versus blind, he's still going to be calling a ton. And it looks like he's debating about the bet size. I think that's pretty good. There's 950 in the pot. The guy's got 20 behind. So, if he does call, there's going to be 14 left in the stack and like 21 in the pot or something like that. That's about right. 556. And it's not going to greatly change his calling range on the turn. Like, it's kind of like he's got, he's going to fold his stuff. He's folding his hands that are like 10s, and he's probably calling with his aces. Although he might sometimes fold like ace jack, ace 10, or whatever if it doesn't have a diamond. Okay, looks like we're coming up on about 40 minutes, so I'm gonna, let's play one more hand here. We've got a king queen on upper left, and this aggro reg from before opens in the cutoff, and he's gonna be opening there pretty wide, even though he's got this loose fishy guy behind him. More than likely, that's pretty much the situation that he was in before against us. So, for us, this is a very easy raise with a hand like king queen, and it's just, it's value against the fish. It's kind of, I wouldn't really even call it a bluff versus the reg, because our hand is going to play, we have the kind of hand that plays okay in 3-bet pots versus the kind of stuff that calls us. Obviously, we're not getting it in pretty, but we're not heartbroken when we get called by the guy. But what we'd like to happen a lot is for him to fold and the fish to call, and that would be great, which is going to happen a pretty decent amount of the time. But it's going to be much, much more profitable to raise there than to call. And we do raise, and we hit top pair. It's kind of a coordinated board versus a fish that I didn't see what it's full to see, but it's probably not much. It looks like it's 33 so far. But anyway, I like to see bet size. It's a coordinated board. He can have lots of pairs, over the card post gut shot, flush draws, whatever. Okay, I am going to go ahead and wrap this puppy up. I hope that you all enjoyed the video. If you'd like to have your own poker video reviewed for free, check out the upload tab on my Facebook fan page. If you're interested in personal coaching or have suggestions for future content for the site, email me at opensourcepoker@gmail.com.